Hello guys, this is Chris, and today we're going to be diving once again into wedding photography with the Fuji X system. This is by far my favorite discipline, so I'm having a lot of joy telling you guys how I shoot. If you're someone who wants to get into the Fuji cameras, Fuji system, or you want to switch from another brand, or simply if you want to have more information as to how to shoot a wedding as a wedding photographer, this video is for you. I've covered a lot of things such as the cameras that I use, the type of gear, some tips and tricks here and there in my previous videos, but I never really covered what my workflow is and a little bit of an in-depth review of the gear that I'm using in 2020. I have been asked this question many times as to what type of gear, what combos, what lenses, what gear, how I shoot, the settings, and so forth, and here are my thoughts. So as part of my workflow, what I do use is two cameras. I have an X-T2 and an X-T3. I have recently switched from an X-T2. I used to have an X-T1, an X-T10, X-T20, and now the best setup that I have is an X-T2 with an X-T3. I would use two X-T3s if I could, but X-T2 is plenty for what I need. The reason I swapped to the X-T3 is because in low light situation, the X-T3 has a better autofocus with the new sensor, and that is a big plus, especially when you're running low with the lights. Despite having a fast lens such as the 56mm f1.2, which is also a very slow focusing lens, as we all know, so having that extra ability to autofocus in low light situations is a big plus. As I covered in my previous video, recently the lenses that I use for weddings are the 23mm f2 and the 56mm f1.2. I sometimes use the 50mm f2 as well. This does cover most of my shots, including group shots. I do have a 10 to 24mm in my bag because we never know that you need to do some creative shot or you need to take a wide angle scene. So that is a good lens to have as well. So in terms of SD cards, I have plenty of them. I have a lot of them. I have two per camera, two in my X-T2, two in my X-T3. These are usually 64 or 128 gigs. You don't really need more than that. You could go for less and have more cards. I have a bunch of 32 gigs as well. And in terms of backup, what I do like about the X-T2, X-T3, X-T4 is that they have a dual SD card slot, which allows you to back up, and that's a function I actually use, so that whatever you have on one card gets backed up on the other card, both RAW and JPEG. That way, if anything happens to one of your SD cards, you're safe and it's backed up. Don't forget to subscribe. This is very important. I really appreciate it and helps me grow this channel even more. I normally shoot RAW and JPEG for weddings. I don't use the JPEG that comes straight out of the camera, but I use the RAW. The reason why I'm using also JPEG is because that way, when I go through all my photos in post and I want to see which photos I'm going to keep and edit, I can just go through the JPEGs and it's way faster on the computer. That way you don't have to go through every single RAW and take forever to preview them or upload them into Lightroom and do the whole thing. One thing that I advise you guys to do is to use smaller JPEGs. What I do is that I usually choose 12 or 8 megapixels for my JPEGs. That way they're even lighter, since I'm not going to give them to my clients and I'm not going to edit them in post. In terms of RAW files, I use lossless compressed. This option is actually great for those that don't know this, because it allows you to have the same quality as any other RAW file, but it will compress those files as if they were a zip file. That way, when you upload in post, such as Lightroom, for example, they will get unzipped or uncompressed, and you will not lose any information. This is the best way to go, since it saves space on your SD card and you don't need to have uncompressed RAW files. In terms of JPEG film simulation, I shoot in classic Chrome. The reason is because the X-T2 doesn't have Eterna being my favorite film simulation right now. So that way I have some consistency throughout all my JPEGs. Again, even if I'm not going to use them, it's good to see the same type of looks on all your photos. In terms of straps, I use Peak Design straps. I have a bunch of them, and that's what I use. I open them to the max so that the cameras go all the way down here and they're easy to reach when I want to shoot. And the cool thing about Peak Design straps and gear in general is that you can remove the strap easily, and when I shoot real estate or I want to do landscaping, I don't have to have this strap dangling or having to remove it in a complicated way. So it really makes my life super easy. When I'm bringing my gear around, I can just remove the straps, doesn't take space, really cool. I do wish that the batteries of the X-T3 would be the same as the X-T4. Unfortunately, it's an older camera, therefore we still have the old batteries from Fuji. They're a little bit better than the ones from the X-T2 because it's the S version, if I don't err. However, we're not gonna see a huge difference. It's going to be 300 something shots normally per battery. So what I do is that I always keep one battery in each camera. I keep two batteries with me at all times, even if I don't have my bag. And what I do like to do is when I get to the evening hall or where I get to the ceremony spot, if I have a chance, I plug the batteries and put them on charge. That way I always have charged batteries ready to go. There are probably as many ways to shoot a wedding as there are wedding photographers. So this is going to be my own way of shooting. Maybe a lot of you do this too, maybe not. That can maybe give you some tips and tricks on how to shoot the wedding in the best way. I tried everything from automatic to manual, and here is the best setup I found so far. So what I do is I set my ISO and my shutter speed to auto, and the aperture is obviously set to manual. Then I go to the third menu. On the first page, you'll find ISO auto setting. I set the auto 1 with a default sensitivity of 200, which is the native ISO of the camera. The max sensitivity is set to 6400, and the minimum shutter speed is set to 1/160th of a second. By doing this, you will tell your camera that the ISO can go all the way to 6400 and can go all the way down to 200. And you don't want the shutter speed to be slower than 1/160th of a second, which basically makes all your photos sharp, and you will have enough light to have the right exposure at every shot you take. In terms of light metering, there are 4 modes on Fuji. The one that I normally use is multi-mode. So what this mode does is that it separates the scene into 256 separate zones, and the camera recognizes tricky scenarios better. Another one that I normally use is spot metering. This one is great if you're doing, for example, a shoot of someone, a portrait shoot, and you want to lock a specific exposure. Let's say it's overexposed, or you're in the bright sun and you want it to be a little bit darker. So you can just select an area that is darker, make the exposure correct, lock it with the auto exposure lock, and take your photo. My favorite bag over the years is the retrospective Think Tank 7. This bag is great because over time it got softer, so it basically follows the shape of my body when I put it on the side. It doesn't bother me at all. And it has these little velcros that allow you to make it more silent or make it more secure depending on the situations. For example, if you're in a church, or if you're at the ceremony, or if you're doing street photography, has nothing to do with weddings, but still, and you want to be very silent when you open and close your bag, you can use these little velcros, and that will allow you to do that. I also have a Peak Design Messenger bag 13-inch. This was one of the first, if not the first version that ever came out. And it's great, not my favorite, but it's fine to bring my gear around for a wedding. It is very important to have the right white balance when you're doing a photo shoot. Same for the weddings, when you're taking photos of the bride and groom and you want to make sure that your white balance and your colors are accurate. This is going to save you a lot of time later on. So you will basically start with the right colors, and from there you can just add on top your post editing. I have mentioned in another video how to use this tool, this amazing tool, and that's something I always keep in my bag when I'm shooting, for example, in the forest or in other scenarios where you can have this green cast or these different colors that will make it really hard to find the right balance. I don't shoot any of my weddings using flash because, as you might know by now, I like to do a lot of candid shots. I like people not to know that I'm taking photos of them. I like to be sort of a guest when I'm shooting a wedding. That's also why I'm using Fujifilm in the first place, because they're small, they're compact, and they're very easy to use. And they look very retro, almost like analog, and people don't even ask you, are you the photographer? So this is actually really cool. One thing I started implementing a couple years ago is the photo booth. So what I do is I put a white background and I use two types of lights. Some time ago, I was using the one I'm using right now to shoot this video and most of my videos, which is the Aputure 120D Mark II. And I use that in combo with the Light Dome Mark II as well, the big one. I've been doing that for a while, which is great because you can set the different amount of light that you want. You can see right away the result. That's great. But then recently I started using the Godox AD400 Pro, which I use also with the Light Dome by Aputure. I use that one in TTL mode with one stop underexposed, that way I don't crush my highlights. Another thing that I like to keep in my bag is the Macro Ring MCX16. I mentioned that one in another video as well, but this little ring basically allows you to use any lens to do some close-ups and some macro photography, which is great for rings, for decorations, for details, for all these sort of things you want to get closer to. You can do it thanks to this little ring. So that's my take on how to shoot weddings in 2020. That's my setup. I have a lot of weddings that are coming up. The results are absolutely gorgeous. I really like this setup, guys. This is like a passion for me. If you have any questions, there's anything else you would like to know, or anything you would like to know better how I use it, or anything, or actually let me know what your setup is for 2020 weddings. If you're using Fujifilm, what you like to use, what camera, what body, what lens, and so forth. I'm actually very curious and interested. And like always, I see you in my next video. Take care.